only mine, but also from Elizabeth Walter. I think she's probably here. She was my doctoral student, and we're going to present some of the data from her work. And this study was actually done in the northeast of Brazil, where I work at. And then I also worked in collaboration with Katia Miller, who was a master's student at the Federal University of Santa Maria, and that's in the south of Brazil. And we worked in collaboration with her major professor, Dr. Carlos Schmidt. So it's nice that we have the same study done in different places. Hi, Peter. Nice to see you. Okay.
Good to see you too.
And it's good to be here at FSU and sharing the study that was actually inspired pretty much in the work that I did in 2016. Both of the studies that I'm going to talk about today, one of them was already published. Actually, it was published last month. So if you guys want to check it out, it was published in the International Journal of Special Education, the study done with Katia Miller. The other one, we are still preparing it. That was the doctoral dissertation of Elizabeth Walter. And as I said, it was really nice because all of this work was actually possible because of the postdoc that I did here in 2016 with Dr. Kelly Whalen, which we had finally our paper published last year about dialogic reading. So I think it's really nice when you can go and work with other professionals and then come back home and kind of apply this technology. Okay, but let's talk about the relevance of this study. Some of the things I think it's important to mention is about half of the students with autism, they don't speak by the age of 3. 33%, about a third of them, are minimally verbal after the age of 5. And when they finally enter school, 65% of them tend to have reading comprehension deficits when they're in school. So this really makes storybook reading an excellent intervention strategy to work with these kids. It's an evidence-based practice that enhances not only language, which is a very limiting skill for kids with autism, but also literacy skills that we are now finding it more and more problematic for this population. Other than this, there's this thing about working in the natural environment. As we know, children with autism have difficulties in generalizing skills, so nothing like working in the natural environment and involving parents as readers. Why do we do this? If we stop to think about it, kids typically spend like 6 hours at home, 6 hours in school, and the rest of the time they spend at home, right, Dr. Dennis? They're with us all the time. So we think they're going to have much more time to interact with the parents than they would with a clinician, than they would even with a school teacher. So research has said that this would be really good to be intervening in the home. Other than this, we also know that most studies that we look into the literature are conducted in high-income countries. So we have a lot of publications in the United States, we have a lot of publications in European countries, but very limited publications on the use of reading studies done with kids with autism, for example, in Brazil, that we consider ourselves our low and middle income countries. More than 40% of children in these countries under the age of 5, they are at risk for fully developing their developmental milestones. So they are really in need of early intervention. There was a study that was published this year saying that although parents would identify characteristics of autism in children when they were 2, final diagnosis only came when they were 5. And this is extremely concerning. I know you guys also have a problem of having pediatricians saying, well, the child has autism. But in Brazil, it's taking way too long. And we need to start intervention early, okay? We also know that parents with limited literacy skills, this is common in low-income countries, they are less keen on reading books to their children when we compare them to literate parents. But despite this information, we know that it's extremely effective even to teach parents who have very limited literacy skills to engage in reading routines with their children. Okay, so I'm talking about reading routines, I'm talking about reading strategies. What am I really talking about? Okay, one of the possible reading intervention protocols that we can use is dialogic reading. So what is dialogic reading? It's an evidence-based, child-centered, shared reading practice, and it really helps you to promote expressive language through an interactive dialogue. And I love this picture because it tells us exactly what happens when you're reading with a child. You sit down, you open a book, and then you talk about the pictures in the book, and you try to maintain a dialogue. So in this case, you're really favoring expressive language, and you're favoring all these nice literacy skills, okay? The major characteristics of dialogic reading, first of all, is repeated reading. So research has shown that's really important for you to read repeatedly. And then you should read at least from 4 to 5 times the same book. And then you have this interactive dialogue about the text. And how do you initiate this dialogue? This dialogue is actually triggered by the adult, right? The person that's that's reading the book to the child. And this triggering, I don't know if this is the word in English, I am sorry, sometimes the words just go away. This triggering is done through an acronym, and I know Americans love acronyms. We have acronyms everywhere, called the crowd strategies. So what would be crowd? These would be specific types of questions that you ask the child during the reading. So what questions are these? We use completion, recall, open-ended, WH, and distancing questions. What are they? When I say completion, I would say something, this is the story of the 3 little, and then the child would say pigs, and they were all excited because they know the name, it's the pigs. Recall would be when you ask the child to remember some fact in the story, like, oh, do you remember why did this little pig run away from the big bad wolf? Open-ended questions, so when you open the book and you say, well, can you tell me what's happening in this story? WH questions, where, who, etc. And distancing questions. And these are really neat because they really help the child to relate the words, to relate the images with their personal experience. And this is really when we acquire the vocabulary. Vocabulary goes much beyond just labeling things. You really have to use it and put it to your personal context in order for you to really understand it. Okay, so this dialogic reading is the crowd acronyms, right? These questions are provided using a scaffolding technique that we use another acronym called PEER. So you prompt using one of the crowd questions. So you ask the question, you evaluate the child's response, you expand on the child's response, and you ask the child to repeat their answer so that they will be really developing language. Okay. What studies have shown, however, is that dialogic reading needs some adaptations when we're working with children with autism. In a lit review that we did, we found that a lot of, when we adapt dialogic reading for children with autism, one of the major things that appear is the use of visual aids. So really, visual support is essential, right? One of the possible ways for you to adapt dialogic reading is through recall. Recall is a program that was developed by Dr. Kelly Whalen and some collaborators here. And what she does is that she combines, the program combines crowd, some modified peer strategies that I'm not going to go into now because it's a whole story. And then we have 3 additional strategies: secured attention, intentional pauses, and again, the use of visual aids. Secured attention is a really neat strategy. It's when you create a context for joint attention. So for example, I have here my book. Actually, I'm working with it with Peter, right? And so we find a page in the book, and then we find something that's really neat, and then we start pointing to it. And it's really nice because the child is going to look exactly where you're looking at. And we know that children with autism have a problem with joint attention. So actually, when you point to the picture, this really helps you establish joint attention, and it would really help the child develop that vocabulary. Intentional pauses are also great because you're reading and then suddenly you stop. And you know what will happen. The child will look at you, it's like, why did you stop? And then most likely he will initiate. So intentional pauses are really good for initiations, and the use of visual aids that you're going to see when I go further into some of these slides. Okay, so you guys had an idea of what recall is, okay? Recall in a nutshell. We can't go too deep into that. So let's talk about the first study that we conducted. So this study was published, if you guys want to check it out. The purpose of this first study was to evaluate the effects of recall implemented by caregivers on the language and literacy skills of a 3-year-old child with autism and a 4-year-old that was typically developing. So we had 2 dyads or dyads. I never know how to pronounce this. Okay, we had Alice, she was 3 years old, and her mother. Alice had moderate autism, good verbal comprehension, but very limited functional expressive language. And João, he was 4 years old, and he worked with his mother. The idea for us to work with a typical child and an atypical child was, other than research asking us to do this all the time, we have now to use a lot of comparison groups, was also because of the social relevance of this. So if we're going to develop a program, it's nice for us to later, for example, implement it in a preschool classroom, right? So if it's a program that actually fits the child that has autism and the typically developing peer, it would be nice to introduce this program in a setting like this. So let's see how it works for a typically developing and a child with ASD. We worked in the home environment. This was difficult to do. This was done during the pandemic. So Katja had everything lined out to do it in a home intervention, and then came the pandemic. What do we do? We use a very simple design, baseline intervention, and these were our variables. So she was trying to evaluate the effects of caregiver-implemented recall on correct child responding to the questions and the frequency of child initiations, okay? The procedures during baseline, what did she do? She just asked the mom to sit down with the child and freely read with the child, and then she pre-selected a couple of books for the child and mom to read. The mother would record the sessions and send them to Katja. And what we were looking at was if the mom would use any of the crowd strategies that I mentioned before. And as soon as we saw that she was not using any of the crowd strategies, we began intervention. Caregiver training was all done online through Zoom. And Katja did a lot of role play and an intervention that we've been working on a lot in Brazil called autoscopy. I don't know how you guys use it here, you probably use it because you probably have another name for it, but it's when the mother would videotape herself, and then she would send it to Katja, and then they would analyze these videos together. And that was really, really interesting, because then the intervention agent had the opportunity to pinpoint, say, well, look, you could do this better, and what could you, have done differently? And again, okay, so she gave this training, and then she also provided mom with the reading materials, the recall materials that you're going to see Now, so these are the materials. We had 7 storybooks that were used for Alice, that's the child with autism, and 5 storybooks that were used for João, who was a typically developing child. This is kind of what our visual support materials look like. So we have this visual support binder where we have 3 pictures for that would be possible answers that the child could give, things that the mom could talk about. And then we also give her this binder with the questions, with the crowd questions. So mom would have the book, the visual support binder, and the binder with the crowd questions. You're going to see this a little bit later in the video. And imagine you have a question like you open a book, and then there's a ladybug in the book. And then you ask the child, what is this book about? And then the child just looks at you because maybe he has limited verbal skills. And then you show the visual support binder with the 3 pictures. And you ask, what is this book about? And then the child has the opportunity to get the ladybug picture and give it to you as if he was responding to your question. So I think you got an idea. Let's look at the results. I'm going to show you Alice. I know you probably will not hear her, but it's important that you...
Olha só. O leãozinho
okay, she's reading a book about the lion.
Em uma bela savana morava Lalo, leãozinho muito bonito e muito vaidoso também.
Okay, and then mom read, this is the story about the little lion, and then she asked, so what is the little lion doing here? And then she would give a couple of options. Did the lion do this, this, or that? And then the little girl would get the picture, the correct picture, and give it to mom. And Alice was actually very excited about the use of these pictures. So mom started off actually pointing to each one, and then Alice decided to take this role. She would take the mom's hand off, and she would actually point to them. And she would get a lot, she got all of them correct, but this was a child that would not speak, and she would mostly use the pictures with mom. João is our typically developing child.
A Joaninha que perdeu as pintinhas.
Mom, João was the cutest thing.
Tininha passeava sozinha e foi
Isso.
Let me stop this one. I wanted you guys just to look at João.
Vamos começar? A Joaninha.
So this is a typically developing child. And he thought it was neat to use some of the pictures himself. One of the things that we saw with João is that he expanded his vocabulary.
E começou então a gritar: socorro, eu não sei nadar. Na água se debatia, pois não sabia nadar. Virou as asas para baixo e começou a remar.
Okay, then she gets the binder. And I know you guys are probably not understanding what she's saying. I don't think the sound is coming out. But what João would do is that he would look at the picture and then he would comment on the picture. He would provide the correct answer, but he would also add other things to it. So we thought that the use of the visual support actually helped enhance some of his language. Okay, so these are the results that we got. We have Alice, Alice's mother. We see that she did not use any of the crowd strategies during baseline. She really began to use it during intervention. Of course, we gave her all the prompts. Sometimes she even made up some other questions. But we're really interested in to see the effects of this. So we see during baseline, this is Alice communicative utterances. So this is the frequency of responses and initiations she had after we introduced recall. This is Alice. And then we also see an increase in the frequency of communicative utterances with João after the intervention. Okay. Okay, so what we really thought it was neat about these results is when we look at Alice, and if you guys take a look at this first graph of Alice, we have caregiver questions in the bars, and then child correct response with visual aids. This is the light gray line. And then we have child correct responses with no visual aids, and this is with the dark gray line, okay? So what we see is that, for example, in the first intervention sessions, the first intervention session, from 11 questions that mom made, 9 of them, Alice responded correctly using the visual aid, okay? And so she maintained using the visual aid. Now, what happens to João? And this is what we probably think about will probably happen in a regular preschool. João started off really thinking that the visual support was really wonderful. So he would start, even though he was a very verbal child, he would use the visual support also to answer mom's question. So we see in his first session, 11 from the 11 questions that mom asked, 8 of them he actually responded using the visual support. 3 of them he just used verbal language. But as the sessions progressed, we see that in the 6th intervention session, he changed. Well, he used the visual support sometimes, but not always. What does this data tell us? It's important for us to give these children a menu of possibilities, okay? So if the child needs the support, it's there. If the child doesn't need the support, it won't be there. And I know you guys probably have the same worry when you put children with autism with typically developing children, and then the parents might say, well, maybe now my child will stop speaking because this child is using a picture board and my child is not using a picture board. So all of these issues we kind of solve when we provide this possibility to all kids. Okay, let me move into the second study because I know we'll probably be running out of time soon. So this second study was pretty much a replication of what we tried to do here when in 2016. So in this study, we tried to evaluate the effects of recall in dialogic reading. So in this case, we compared simple dialogic reading with recall that was also implemented by caregivers on the language and literacy of 2 preschoolers with ASD and 1 typically developing peer. We worked in the home. Some sessions were done in the clinic, but this is a whole issue. This was also done during the pandemic. Sometimes it was very difficult to collect some of this data. So our independent variables were extra recall and dialogic reading, and the dependent variables, we wanted to look at oral reading comprehension, vocabulary knowledge, and communication turn taking. I won't talk about all of this data, it's a lot. And this time we worked with an experimental design, a randomized ABAB phase order within series design with a block randomized scheme. Remember when we talked about this with Kelly, it was like, my gosh, what design is this? We had never used it. It was really neat to learn about this. And essentially it's a randomized intervention where you randomize the whatever training, whatever treatment you're giving, you randomize the books, everything is randomized. So we had 3 participants, Elias and Julia. They were children with autism. One was 5, the other one was 4. And then we had a typically developing child that was in HEAP. We were supposed to have many more children, but with all the logistic, it was not possible. So we had them reading 4 books, actually 1 book per week. We had recall and then dialogic reading, recall, dialogic reading, so kind of worked this way. What materials did we have? We had 8 books. All books were about the same length, about the same level of difficulty, and these were randomly included in either recall or dialogic reading format, okay? Each book came with a booklet. What are these booklets? These booklets are actually the questions that the caregiver will make while reading to the child. So for example, we have a book called The Famous Seal. So in Portuguese, we say a foca famosa, okay? And so let's suppose we open the cover of the book, and then I ask the child, what animal is this? And then the child, if the child is nonverbal, the child would not answer. And then I provide them with these three options. Is this a tiger, a seal, or a whale? And then the child will have the opportunity to say a seal. And then I wanted to know not only the labeling, but also the vocabulary function. So then I would ask, so what does this animal eat? And then the child would point to whatever the animal eats in case he couldn't verbally say it, or if he didn't know, okay? Each book came with 3 booklets because we had different levels of difficulty in the question. I'm going to show you a very small video of how this was done. This is Henri, this is their typically developing
Vamos
child.
começar a leitura do dia 1.
And we had to adapt this to, so
famosa.
this mom actually read the
Que
book
animal é
online
esse?
with the child.
A foca, muito
Yes.
bem.
So what
Ela
animal
é
is this?
famosa.
It's
Tá
the
vendo?
seal.
O que esse animal come?
What does this animal eat? She asks him. And then he doesn't reply.
Não sabe?
And then he says, I don't know.
Você acha que
And then
esse
she gives
animal
him the
come
possibility.
peixe, come macarrão ou come pizza?
What do you think he eats?
Peixe?
And then he would
Muito
say whatever
bem,
it was.
come peixe.
Okay, all of these questions.
Vamos começar a leitura.
Okay, so what kind of questions did we have in these booklets? As we had previously said, we used the crowd questions, right? Completion, recall, open-ended, WH, and distancing. But we also made some very specific questions about inferences, about emotional identification, like how do you think the frog feels? WH function, we wanted to very specific questions about function of the vocabulary, and the strategy that we have been, that some of the mothers would use spontaneously. This is something that we found in a previous study, that moms typically use a lot of phonological completion. So she would say things like the 3 pigs in the wool, and then the child would have to complete phonologically whatever she said. What are the results that we have? Okay. In terms of comprehension, remembering that we're talking about the frequency of correct responding to the crowd questions, plus those 4 extra questions that we have. I'm going to just show you the data from Elias, our child with autism. And we have like percentage of correct responses to each one of them. So for example, completion, Elias got 57% in recall, 80% in dialogic reading. And so you have these differences here between them. When you look at this, it doesn't really tell us much, right? It's complicated to say, well, is there a program that's better than the other? So we went to try to do some statistics with this. And we came up with this really new graph. I had never worked with this before. When we put this in a graph like this, for you guys to understand it, each dot represents a question type, for example. So here is a dot that represents completion, and this is a dot that represents completion in dialogic reading and in recall. When we compare these 2 figures, what do we find? That recall has higher percentage of correct answers. And this was actually, we saw this significant difference when we applied the Wilcoxon-Sign rank test. So recall was better, the Elias responded better, had higher percentage of correct responses using recall than simple dialogic reading. Same thing happened to Julia, and she had way better responding using recall than dialogic reading. And the same thing happened to Henri as well. He also had greater percentage of correct responding when using recall than dialogic reading, okay? In terms of vocabulary gains, we wanted to know the frequency of correct answers to vocabulary. How was this vocabulary assessment made? We selected 5 words. We tried to use 2 nouns, 2 verbs, at least 1 adjective, and we kind of did a system of a pointing system. So for example, we showed these pictures to the child, and they got a point every time they get one of these right. So I asked her, what is this? If she said, oh, that's a seal, she gets a point. Where does the seal live? She got a point. And then we asked, please show me seal. And then she got a point. So each word could have a maximum of 3 points, right? So we selected 5 words in the book. That makes the child could have a top of 15 points maximum in her in her vocabulary assessment. This is a huge thing. I won't be able to explain details of all of this, but this is just for you guys to have an idea of how the vocabulary assessment was done. And we tried to select 5 words per book, okay? So now I show you Elias, our child with autism, and how were his vocabulary gains per phase. So we have here in the pre-test, so let's say he knew some of the words, of the 5 words that we selected, he had like a 7, right? And then the post-test, he had like I don't know, maybe a 13 in the, so this is a pre-test, a post-test using recall. And then we have dialogic reading, and then we have dialogic reading again and recall. When we look at these graphs, and we're talking about then the vocabulary gains per phase, is there a statistical difference between these phases? You look at it doesn't look at as it has. So we try to put this in another graph. What we found is that all of the 3 kids actually increased, they had vocabulary gains. They really learned the words using either of the programs. So both programs were very effective at teaching new vocabulary, right? But we did not find any significant differences between the programs, okay? I think this was clear. So although there was a gain in vocabulary, we did not see a difference between programs, okay? So just to finish up, this is my last slide. What we find is that we had higher percentage of correct responses with recall for the 3 participants. Again, saying that recall is effective for kids with on the spectrum, as also typically developing kids. We had vocabulary gains for the 3 participants using both programs. So either recall or dialogic reading are very effective at that. We had Elias, the child with more severe symptoms. He had better results in responding, for example, to concrete questions. Remember that we got some inference-made questions, etc. Well, the program really showed to be better when we tried to use visual support in order to respond to more abstract questions. I'm sorry. And again, greater use of visual support by the children with ASD, which is what we find in the literature. Okay. Obrigada. That's how we say thank you in Portuguese. If you guys have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Dr. Nunes. Yes, so feel free to unmute and ask Dr. Nunes a question, or if you would like to put it in the chat, can you see the chat with your slides on, Deborah?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, great.
No, actually I can't. Let me turn this off. I'm seeing the people, I'm not seeing the chat.
That's okay, I can monitor the chat, no big deal.
Okay, okay, stop sharing. Oh, good, I'm seeing everybody.
Tudo bem? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I
Okay.
can.
Bom dia, eu sou brasileira também.
Oh, good.
I put a message on the chat because I cannot miss the chance of connecting with you.
Mhm.
One, I'm a faculty at Florida State University at the Learning Systems Institute.
Oh, great.
And I'm a research faculty, and we work internationally. I have several projects in different places, and I'm trying to land a collaboration in my own home country in Brazil that I haven't done so far.
Wonderful. And we meet in Tallahassee.
I know, and you could be the key to that potential collaboration with colleagues that I have here as well. So we work in several areas, including helping other countries, mostly low-income countries, in the areas of reading and writing in very low resource environments. And I worked in Brazil way back, more than, I've been in the US for the last 36 years, 37 years. But in Brazil, I work in favelas in Rio. I grew up in Rio. And I went to Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. I'm from Recife originally.
Okay.
So, and then I collaborated with some federal institutes in Brazil as well, but it's really hard to fund that collaboration with people here in the US and people at different universities or the federal institutes in different locations in Brazil. But we do have a team of people working in the areas of reading and writing in low resource environments. And in Brazil, I work with publishers, and I have several children's books published in Brazil in Portuguese that I'm trying to go back to that, my former life as a graphic designer, illustrator, and writer. And we do a lot of research in the areas of reading and writing, including not me, but people who are doing research in the areas of autism and, children with different types of abilities or disabilities in different countries. So when I saw the flyer, and I have to leave very soon because I was in another Zoom meeting, and I'm going to another meeting now. So I didn't want to miss this opportunity to connect with you. And I put my email and my number on the chat.
Okay, okay.
And I hope that we can stay in touch.
Oh, sure. It was a pleasure to meet you, Flavia.
Yeah,
Okay.
And I heard that you were at FSU before, and I've been here for 14 years and we never met.
Oh my God. No, I was here 20 years ago. Actually, my major professor, Dr. Henline, is here with me. She's the responsible for me coming back.
All right.
So I've been, I told them that I come back every 7 years. I was here 7 years ago, and then I was here 20 years ago.
So who is your professor? Carolyn Harrington?
No, Dr. Mary Frances Henline.
Oh, okay. I heard about her. Yes. Yeah. Wow, very nice and very good presentation. I was trying to keep my head in two things at the same time. So yes. Are you located where right now?
And now we're in the Stone Building.
Oh, you were here in Tallahassee?
Yeah, I'm here in Tallahassee, School of Teacher Education. Yeah.
For how long are you going to be around?
I'll be here until January.
Oh, well, you were here. Okay, I was not sure. So maybe you can have coffee, and I'm going to Egypt on January 6th. So I'll be here until the 6th of May.
Okay, great, Flavia. Let's talk then.
Yeah, I would love to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming by.
All right.
Deborah, I was interested to hear your research because I have not yet read it, but as one of the collaborators with Dr. Whalen is developing Recall, we're actually glad to have more research done. And I think we're considered close to being evidence-based now. There's been so much research done by other research teams. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, when I go out and supervise our practicum teachers, our practicum students, and our interns, I don't see even dialogic reading, let alone recall, being used by pre-K or kindergarten teachers. And I wondered if you saw that same research to practice gap with good shared reading practices in Brazil.
Yeah, we are having a lot of that difficulty too. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. Sometimes the teacher just sits down and starts reading. It doesn't even show the books to the child. And sometimes it would just show it like that really quickly. And the kids that have verbal difficulties, they typically do not participate. So we're actually trying to now do another study where we have some kids using AAC systems. Renata, this is one of my graduate students. She's also here. And she's actually trying to start using AAC during the reading. So if the teacher is not helping, showing at least the child that has very limited verbal skills, if at least they have this resource, maybe they can call the teacher's attention, listen, I want to participate. But we have pretty much the same thing, not much dialogic reading being done.
Deborah,
Peter, I saw you shake your head yes when I asked my question.
Oh yeah, I'm just a really big fan of dialogic reading. I know I made sure to use it in my classroom, and I'm really excited to hear Dr. Nunes mention about the AAC use and researching that. That's really, really exciting. I actually also had a question though. When it came to the autoscopy, when you in the first study you mentioned, giving the parents feedback on their skill usage, and I wanted to ask, what was that process like? Were the parents really did they respond positively to the critique of their use of the skills? And any tips that you have for that process?
Great, good question,
Excuse me,
Peter.
that's a great question for our summer study, Peter and
Yeah.
Deborah, right? So good.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay,
we
good.
are about
Okay.
to go into the homes too. It wasn't a very atypical period since we were in the pandemic. So they didn't have much to do at home. So anything that was coming from the outside world seemed wonderful. And again, as I said, since we have so much limited early intervention in Brazil, I think the parents were really open to that. I mean, it's some help that I'm getting. And so the parents were really good at providing this feedback to actually Katia, who was the person that was actually conducting it. So it was good. It was good.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
yeah, I was interested in that too, Peter, also because it sounds a lot like practice-based coaching, a lot of reflection on practice, showing teachers their data, or in this case, parents, and allowing them to reflect on what they're doing and what's working and what's not working. So it's a really individualized approach. So yeah, very exciting. I also wanted to ask about the inference.
You guys, I'm sorry, Dr. Nunes, but you call it self-coaching. Is that the word?
It's called practice-based coaching. There's different variations of coaching frameworks, but the one that I'm thinking of is Pat Snyder and some of her colleagues have developed, and they record themselves and then a coach or someone watches them and provides feedback, and they talk through the strategies that are being used, really pointing out their strengths, pointing out areas where they can continue to increase. And again, it's really and they set goals and they try and meet their goals and figure out, what do you need to be successful? So, it sounds very similar to what you were doing with the parents. So that's really neat. I wanted to ask about the inclusion of inferencing questions, because that's something relatively new that I've also started to work on. And it seemed like that was a very low, if I was looking at do you have any sense of what it would, inferencing is a challenging skill, and I'm struggling myself with this group to figure out, do you have a sense of what they would need to be able to address or get to that inferencing component?
Yeah, this was one of the lowest responses that we have. Some of the, again, we never know, is it that we're not providing them with enough information? And then we talk about the kids that are very minimally verbal or non-verbal. I mean, how can we get this across? So this was pretty consistent too. We had very limited correct responses to the inference questions and the distancing questions as well. Of course, labeling would always be easier, but how do we get to them? And then sometimes when we talk to parents, we had even a mother that would mention things like, I'm not going to ask this question. I know he's not going to be able to reply it. So this is another issue. Are these kids not responding because we're not stimulating this type of questions? They would just keep in the very basic questions. And Elizabeth Walter, she's actually the conducted the study. She was the primary investigator. She had some very nice feedback from the parents actually saying these kinds of things. And it's hard to change their framework. I mean, their kid might be limited verbal, but he can understand inferences.
Sure. And did you find it with the typically developing kids as well? It seemed like that was one of their lower responses. if I
Yes,
remember. Okay.
that was
Okay.
too.
Okay, thank you. We still have about 12-ish minutes, so any further questions for Dr. Nunes?
I have one more. When it came to the completion questions, I believe the example you had was the 3 little pigs blank. Was
Uh-huh.
it just an intentional pause that you left after saying pigs, or did the parents say blank for the
Oh,
child to
okay.
know
No, it
that
was
they
like
had?
an intentional pause. This
Okay.
was actually in Elizabeth's previous study. What she found is that the mom would use this strategy naturally. And when we looked at some data from other studies, they would use it as well. It's like, let's incorporate this to our study. Let's really start measuring to see if these strategies are used by mothers because they know that it really works with their kids. And it does. So I think this is the nice thing when we get like an intervention package and we do our cultural adaptations. So definitely in our dialogic reading, we need to include phonological completion to that. That's a strategy that works and moms use it all the time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Not only moms, dads. Okay.
So what are you planning to do here, Dr. Nunes? Are you continuing this work, or what do you have plans moving forward? I'm curious.
Okay, right now I'm working with Peter, Dr. Henline, and Kelly. We're trying to finally start our study. We've been having a tough time going to the school, so now we're probably going to be working in the homes, right, Peter? And then I continue with my work back in Brazil. So I'm working sometimes in the morning, I'm here, in the afternoon, I'm in Brazil. And so I have some students that are still working with dialogic reading. Renata, who is here, is one of them. So really into this reading business. So it's nice. It's nice. I think it's, as I said, I think it's really good for you to take a sabbatical. I know you're in a sabbatical now, Dr. Dennis, where we stop. It's like, let me study something else. And it was really eye-opening to start working with recall.
Thank you. Any other final comments, questions for Dr. Nunes?
Okay. Oh, Eddie, thank you for coming. Eddie's right beside here, right? Thank you for coming to the presentation.
I appreciated one of your last comments about, I think of it as opportunity cost, essentially, that idea of the parent, it makes my heart hurt to think about a parent saying like, I'm not even going to ask this question because I know they can't answer. And I think exploring that and thinking about pre-service teachers too, and the principle of that least dangerous assumption, and just recognizing that they're not going to be able to do it if they don't have the opportunity to try.
Exactly.
So that was something that is just important for us to be sort of cognizant of, that I don't know if the right word is bias, but that still exists and can still impact, because then it makes me think about how accurate are our assessments then, right? Like depending on the person providing the assessment. So
yeah. And sometimes even the bias that sometimes when we come with AACs to the classroom, and then you have those teachers that say, no, I'm not going to use that. My child is going to stop speaking if you start using those pictures.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same idea. Let's just keep him silent. He won't know how to make inferences. He won't speak. I mean, one less child to teach. Okay.
Okay, well, if no one else has any last minute questions or anything, thank you again, Dr. Nunes, for taking time to be here and talk about this important research. Hopefully see you in person at some point.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for attending, and we'll be sending out information about next academic year colloquium as soon as we begin working on that. So I appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a good end of the semester, smooth end of the semester.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you very much.
Have a
Bye,
good
Dr.
weekend.
Nunes.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.